Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 627, Zuckerberg Wasn't Breastfed. Monday, March 8th, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. Every time ad tech looks like they have a plan for the post-cookie world, Google throws another wrench in the works. And once again, ad tech companies are reeling after Google shut down their latest scheme. What's next? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, will programmatic TV be first party? Whether Snap could drive an AR revolution? The problem with ad bans during COVID? Plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and president of Convince and Convert, author and keynote speaker, Mr. Jay Baer. Hi, Jay.
Bob, you old so-and-so, fantastic to be back on the BeanCast.
Glad to get you back on the show finally. You've had some troubles here. Glad that you can make it. Now, next, we welcome back the CEO of Twit.tv, Ms. Lisa Laporte. Lisa, hi.
Hi, Bob. It's great to be back. Looking forward to the panel.
Glad you can make it as well. Now, also with us, we have the Associate Vice President of Marketing Strategy at Arizona State University, author, speaker, Mr. Adam Pierno. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Bob. Great to be back with you.
Great to have you on the show. And finally, we have the Department Chair of Management and Marketing at Oakland University, Dr. Janell Townsend. Janell, I almost missed your doctor.
It's fine. I wouldn't be offended. It's great to be here again. Enjoy the opportunity.
Yeah, this is a great panel. I'm really excited about kind of bringing these topics to bear to your fabulous minds. So let's get on to it right away. First up, with the deadline of 2022 fast approaching for the end of the cookie, yes, you heard me right, the cookie is going away in 2022, ad tech had hoped to rely on alternate tracking solutions based on ideas like the Unified ID standard, which is an email indicator. But Google this past week killed this and other similar tracking within its own ecosystem. So Jay, what's a modern ad tech company supposed to do now? I mean, it's just like they've explored alternative options. Google has killed all that. Is the future going to be untrackable online? Is that just what's going to happen and we have to make peace with it?
I don't know if I would say untrackable, Bob, but we have to go back and do the hard work we used to do before any of this was invented. Adam and I used to work together, Bob. I don't know if you know that. We used to share a cubicle and worked on a lot of things together back in the days before we had first and second party ad tracking. And you know what we had to do, Bob? It was amazing. We had to actually test our creative. We had to actually segment audiences by cohort and psychographics.
I think that's more. I think that's more my point. I mean, it's or it's
you
not
just got to work a little harder, man. It's
right.
Too easy. Ad tech's made it too easy now. I know exactly what you bought every 5 seconds on Instagram. It's really easy to sell in that environment. Now we have to actually do the hard work, testing, segmentation, maybe even. This is going to sound crazy, Bob.
I know.
Maybe the return of the focus group.
Oh no. Yeah, I understand that, and I mean, I get your point here that there is a way to continue to track and do measurement and target effectively. We have those methods; they're just not easy. They're not able to scale to the level of a programmatic universe. Can we go back? Is it reasonable? I mean, does anybody have a sharp opinion about this? I mean, can we go back to the old way of doing things, or are we as the genie out of the bottle and we always need to have some kind of scalable, programmatic, trackable system in order to be effective anymore?
I'll hop Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No,
Go ahead.
go for it. Go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, we never really relinquished some of the old pieces that we do at Twit. We still poll our audience. We still ask them for feedback and handle in ways some focus groups that we used to do well before ad tech jumped in. And I think they've been ignoring those pieces. So now you're going to actually have to go to people that are doing that. You're going to have to go to the first party. But don't think Google's going to not benefit here. They've got all the information. I have a feeling that they're going to still leverage that on a first party basis instead of allowing cookie tracking. So I just think it's really smart to get back to paying attention to the human side of things. So that's my opinion on.
Yeah, that's an ugly underbelly of this story that I think the journalists out there are doing a good job of covering it, but it's worth mentioning here that Google is still going to have access to this data, and Google's still going to be able to give you that kind of tracking with their advertising. They're just not going to supply you as an advertiser with that data, and it's almost like they're putting it's exactly like they're putting a chokehold on the entire market. They're making it so that everybody has to come through them. And the same with Facebook and all the other data brokers. I mean, they're looking at it from that standpoint. Is that not the case? I mean, it's just like you're still going to be able to do tracking on your own sites. And so that's going to make everybody want to come to you.
I mean, if you have the fastest car in town, Bob, why do you give out free rides?
Well, exactly. Except that's what we call a monopoly.
Well, true, but that's probably a topic for another show, whether or not Google is a monopoly. But look, Twitter did the same thing. I mean, Twitter's massively shut down the fire hose and API access. It's not the same as first-party tracking, I certainly understand. But this premise of we have a data advantage, therefore we're going to press this advantage, that's been going on as long as there has actually been computers. So from Google's standpoint, I completely understand it. The data brokers are going to be much more in demand because they can cobble together second and third party data and give you some interesting things that maybe you can't get in this new order. But I also wonder, though, Bob, if this doesn't put some additional emphasis on brands as publishers, on, we're not going to worry so much about inserting ads on a one-on-one basis. We're going to try and create our own content so that we can have that relationship directly with our own audience. I just wonder, that's probably a step or two removed from this quid pro quo, but I just wonder if this doesn't put a little gas on that fire too.
So you're thinking that this is going to be an inspiration for every brand to become a media company, which has been the big mantra of the content marketers for some time. Is that what you're positing?
Well, maybe. I don't know if that is enough logs on the fire to force that hand in and of itself. But I think one of the reasons why the notion of brands as publishing companies didn't fully take off in ways that content marketers like myself may have predicted is that it's like, well, geez, if it's just as easy to tell me exactly who these people are, what they want to buy through this aggregated tracking data, why would I go to the trouble of building my own television network, so to speak?
Right.
Maybe now the juice gets to be worth the squeeze.
Yeah, that is interesting. Hey, Janell, I'm wondering, out of all the different pivots that we could possibly take, and there are lots of them on the table, we've mentioned quite a few of them, there's plenty more out there. What's the pivot that makes the most sense to you, and what would it take to get there?
Well, I think I agree with Jay and Lisa in many ways in that, from an academic perspective, we never stopped teaching the basics. Right. I mean, that's where it begins. So in getting into the actual nitty gritty details of the tracking itself has really been left a lot more to the IT and computer science folks, at least in the academic space. And so I don't think it's going to do a lot to change how we go about teaching these things to people. And so hopefully they're going back to their basics to be able to be successful in this, new world that Google is creating for us. On the other hand, I think that there's also some truth to this idea that there's almost like a new industry in a way is going to crop up from this idea of even going further into the data brokers. For example, the internet service providers, right? They have a lot of that data too now that Google has. So maybe there's going to be some cropping up of some ways that people are doing things, a little bit differently, but they're still going to find a way to get that data that they want.
That's the whole 5G harp. I know that the internet service providers are much broader than that, and a lot of them are tracking at the service level. But when you get into a 5G situation where supposedly in the next 5 to 10 years, everything will be totally seamless, where you have one internet company that supplies your cell phone service and your home service, and it goes wherever you go. It's just constantly on. That gives the phone company or whoever's providing that service with an unbelievable amount of power over the location data and the information transfers going on their own systems. I mean, is that the future? Is this like, are Google and Facebook and Twitter and Apple and everybody really fighting against that future and trying to protect their own streams? Because there's a service level understanding of the data that seems to be a lot stronger than these independent publisher levels of data. I mean, what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of what they're doing, is trying to insulate themselves from those ISPs and other providers that will try to creep in as more anti-competitive kind of claims are made against Google and Apple at all. But I could also see a pivot where big brands are taking their first-party data and they're figuring out how new ways to partner with those data brokers and ISPs and new organizations that are formed that are trying to figure out ways around Google and Apple's rules about pooling data. So I think we'll see a new either technology or platform innovation around how do we create lookalikes from the audiences that we've earned, to Jay's point, that we're creating content for and that we are figuring out more about. But I need to grow. My brand will not grow if I can't add new people that look like those people. Somebody will fill that gap if Google and Apple won't allow that or won't continue to let that kind of targeting happen. Somebody will figure out a way to do it.
And Adam, do you agree with everybody else here that it's back to basics in terms of marketing and targeting and measurement and all the other things that we do so quickly via computers nowadays? I mean, it's just like all of that goes back to the basics, and that's how you're going to proceed. Is that kind of the strategy you would employ?
That's what we'll see a lot. Yeah, back to basics, really, really understanding your first-party data, which is one of the most basic things it is know your customer. This is going to hit small businesses worst because a lot of small businesses just push all their chips into Google or Facebook and let the targeting sort itself out over time. They don't have to be necessarily well-schooled, well-versed in the marketing. They just have to know enough about how to game Google or Facebook. And you can be really skilled at that. That's excellent. But they'll be punished. There will be people that are punished for that approach when the rules change overnight, as we've seen so many times with algorithm shifts by every tech platform, including, Twitter and all of them.
There was one really interesting side story that sprung out of all this news this past week was I forget which article it was. It'll be in the show notes. You can find it for yourself. But one of the articles mentioned that this leaves streaming television as probably the only thing that's left that can effectively target programmatically, that there is no restriction on that type of targeting and that type of advertising. And quite frankly, everybody's moving toward video already in terms of the types of advertising that they're trying to do online. Everybody's very excited about programmatic TV, and the streaming services are really kicking off into high gear. Is that the future? Is a migration away from these digital platforms into digital streaming as the lion's share of digital advertising? I'll go with Jay on that.
Ultimately, yes. In the short term, no. There's still too much confusion in the channel with over-the-top options. You can't swing a cat without somebody launching another streaming service. This week was Paramount, right? I mean, tomorrow will be the Bob Norp, streaming app. It's
followed closely by the Bob Norp Bitcoin or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, it's real hard to buy media in that regard. And to Adam's point, which is very well designed, yes, for large companies who have groups of people who do nothing but try and solve this problem every day, sure, they can pivot away from programmatic display to semi-programmatic inserted streaming ads pretty quickly. But for the small and mid-sized companies who are used to just uploading a credit card to Google or Facebook, that leap to figuring out where to buy and also to say, look, you don't need low resolution video ads. You now need broadcast quality or broadcast quality-esque video ads. That's a pretty big chasm to leap over. So for the big guys, yes, in the short term, probably. For the medium and small guys, it's going to be a while, if ever.
That's an interesting side story that I didn't write down in my notes that I really wanted to get to. So thank you for bringing it up. There is that democratization thing going on online that's going to be taken away from a lot of the small advertisers, because the small advertisers were able to bid in the same type of pool as the big advertisers, and it's just like they were given amazingly powerful tracking tools that will not be available to them once this goes forward, and they won't have the money to do programmatic television to the extent that the big brands will. So does this situation unfairly tilt the balance in favor of the big advertisers and leave the small advertisers really floating adrift?
I think, though, it's important to consider that the TV advertising, the DIA, the direct interactive advertising, is a means that small companies eventually probably can use in the same way that they use Facebook, for example. Facebook's big thing has really been, or one of their big things has been, that they can give this opportunity for these small, very local companies to be able to advertise to other people on their platform. And Google has as well, but I think even Facebook has even been more so in this space. And there is that potential for the TV advertising, or, the Roku, the terminology, I'm sorry, I'm tripping over a little bit, but, the basic idea being that you can have that direct contact with people. I think the smaller companies are eventually going to get very good at this. And I think the companies like Roku that provide these services are going to find a way to do that. Or if they're smart, they will. Because that's, that level of granularity that you can get to through the TV applications is just, is amazing, quite honestly. So I do think that they're going to find a way to do that.
Yeah, Janell, you might be, Jay referenced OTT. Maybe you meant addressable was the one that was on the tip of your tongue. And I think you're right. It will get there. Right now, you need some more scale to make that move into addressable and have a significant reach. But that's a place that it can flourish. And that, again, Bob, to your point earlier, that goes through largely ISPs and cable providers, where there's that play to go end around Google and Facebook and Apple.
The other thing, too, is the technology that's changing, that's allowing people to make, their own YouTube videos. And, I don't know if you guys have ever, scrolled through some of the things that are on TikTok or the Instagram feeds. It's amazing to me how professional so many of these videos are now. So I think that's also another thing that's going to allow smaller companies to be able to play in the space eventually.
Well, I want to continue this conversation about the television angle here, because our next story is about Roku buying Nielsen's addressable TV ad business. Janell, is this further proof that streaming TV holds the key to targeted advertising's future? I mean, the fact that Roku is bringing Nielsen's TV ad business in-house makes it so that they're becoming a first-party vendor of their own ad sales, and I'm assuming other people's ad sales. But the idea of being able to go to the platform that's delivering television and be able to get your ads all together in one source in one place, is that the future of addressable TV? All coming, instead of being more like a digital clearinghouse that gives you ads on lots of different platforms, like it is online on the net. You have more of a Facebook model for every single one of the TV networks. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, I do think we're going probably in that direction. I find it to be fascinating to see the different models that the DirecTV advertising is taking. If anyone has Peacock and has used Peacock, I have the type that comes with Xfinity internet service.
Right.
And
I've heard of that.
So that one has commercials with it. But what's really fascinating is that if you press the pause button on a show, a static commercial comes up or a static ad comes up on the TV. It's fascinating. It's like they're really getting this, and it is right now big advertisers. Eventually, it may become some smaller advertisers too with that, especially again with that granularity that's potential there.
And Peacock was really
it's just
smart.
Fascinating to me.
NBC Universal was really smart about when they did their connected TV plans. I mean, they were selling all this past year, for the past couple of years, really, package deals between their online and their offline type, offerings, so that, a lot of the big advertisers who would normally advertise on their network are coming to their streaming service because of these deals that they cut with the network. It's just like, it was really smart on Linda Yaccarino's part to put all that together. What does everybody else think? I mean, I guess, Jay, I
think it's brilliant. I think Roku's move here is super smart and exactly at the right time. All these other people in the streaming ecosystem are worried about content, right? It's largely a content fight. And Roku is focused very specifically on how to monetize that content. To me, that makes them indispensable. There's no question that eventually household level ads via OTT will be the predominant form of advertising, period. There's no question. It's just when that day comes. And so to have one of the major platforms to enable that kind of ad insertion, I think is a really smart strategic move. And the market agrees. They were up 6% on this news instantaneously. And the data I saw projects a 75% increase in addressable TV ads by 2022 alone, which is a really steep ramp. So I think we will look back on this. I really believe this, Bob. We will look back on this move like Facebook buying Instagram, where at the time you're like, I don't know, that seems like a lot of money. And then you realize that they were crazy like a fox. I think this Roku move will be exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I would liken it more to Google buying DoubleClick. I mean, it's just like it's got this real opportunity for a big network effect.
Indeed. That's a better correlation for sure, and more similar industry. Yep, good call.
Yeah, and, it's important for us to remember, and just to put in context for the audience in case you didn't know, I mean, Roku and Amazon Fire are the two biggest streaming services out there for television. I mean, it's just like, these are not small players, bit players. So if you're I want to disabuse you of the notion out there, if you think this is a small deal, this is a huge deal going on. Lisa, I mean, this is your game as well. I mean, it's just like you get involved with the ad sales, obviously, on your network. So, I mean, is this a sign of disintermediation of the centralized measurement services or ad serving services, and brings it more in line upon the individual networks and publishers to have their own ad service, or else they're going to be, let's face it, screwed down the line?
I think it's brilliant that they're doing this. I think it's needed. We need to keep breaking up these giant companies because, I have Xfinity too. They pretty much own the market share. So with Roku stepping in and being able to service these ads, I'm personally super excited that more and more platforms are opening up, because to me, that's what's going to happen with Google, breaking apart too, and, with pushing TV and being more on demand and streaming. I thought the move was brilliant. I kind of wish I had some Roku stock. And I just love that it's going to level the playing field even more. I think big brands are testing it now, but once they really integrate this into their features, I have a feeling it's going to allow more small businesses and smaller people to be working with them to also get a piece of that pie. Spotify bought Megaphone last year. If we're talking a little bit about our industry, I've been seeing that happen on the audio side. We've been on Megaphone, and as soon as Spotify brought their sales team to it, we're seeing a huge impact on our content with adding that. So I think the more we can break up, the bigger TVs and bring in, different platforms for other people to use, like streaming, as well as these already established giants out there, I think it's going to increase, competition. And I think that it's smart that they moved now. I think the time was right.
Adam, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because I'm looking at this, I'm listening to the conversation, I'm kind of internalizing it, and I'm coming up with the fact that this sounds like the cable TV model all again. Why is this different? Why is this any different than the cable TV model where, you have the networks, they're selling their own ads, the shows are selling their own ads, and suddenly, but you also have the network, the pipes that are delivering the shows selling ads as well. Is this the same model over again, or is it different?
It sure does seem to be forming back into that. It's like the giant robot was smashed into pieces, and now it's reforming into new giant robots that are roughly the same shape and size that we've been used to with the cable model.
Me?
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry for the weird reference. Go ahead.
So it's, I think we are seeing some of that recombination of the tenets of those business models. But what's different is the way the content is served, and even the more atomized style that we'll ultimately get to of how finely we can target. Even cable at its best was still that local cable buy model, which had some limitations. If Roku owns the customer relationship and the pipes and the data, they can reach people on a really tight, discrete basis with messaging around things that they have a great knowledge of their preference for. It's a lot different than running a local car dealer ad during a Phoenix Suns game.
So let me go around for the last, kind of circle around the panel here on this subject. And what comes next? I mean, are we going to see a land rush for all these ad serving technologies in this space? I mean, is Trade Desk going to go next? Is there some big deal in the works that's going to be even bigger than this that we have to keep our eye on? Anybody want to play Karnak and predict the future?
Yeah, a year ago, I would have guessed that Google and Facebook and maybe Apple would be getting into this space. But now with Congress and the White House looking at those bigger organizations, it's almost the opposite, where you can see what Google's doing, you can see what Apple's doing, where they're almost pushing away from it to try to not appear to be too greedy or to be trying to claim too many stakes in this fight. So you might see each of these streamers trying to buy those different analytics and delivery systems, or you might see maybe the next thing that we'll see is how is Roku going to take that addressable business and what kind of inventory are they going to create? Because I don't think I think the innovations will be around format and targeting more than necessarily technology. And I don't think anybody's really cracked the code on that yet. It still shows up as a pre-roll or a mid-roll.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, the form of the advertising is probably more important right now than the technology, even though we need technology to be, kind of catch up to what the delivery systems are. Janell, what are your thoughts here? I mean, it's just like we started with you. How do you want to tie this up in a bow?
Well, I think there's another angle to this that we haven't really talked about, because we've talked about it more as the advertising channel approach, as opposed to thinking about the brand of the companies themselves. So Google, Apple, et cetera. Moving away from, Apple especially has used privacy as one of their key positioning attributes for their brand. We will keep your data safe. We will keep your privacy. And, that's the big battle between Apple and Facebook right now, right? And, Facebook's entire business model is built around this idea of selling people's data. Google's is largely as well, but for some reason they haven't had the same level of backlash against their brand because of these privacy concerns, which, by rights there should be. So it's going to be, interesting to see how some of the companies that are in this space choose to establish their brands and how to use their business models. For example, Netflix. Netflix starts putting commercials. It changes the entire brand completely.
Right.
in their whole business model. So I think that's another, sort of angle to this whole discussion that is pretty relevant. What position do you want to occupy in the minds of your consumers relative to your competitors on these key points?
Let me push back on that for just a second, because does that kind of branding reach the consumer's eyes in the end? Because this is really about trying to position yourself in the marketplace to other businesses, the advertisers, the true clients of the content. So does the user's impression of the brand change that dramatically? I mean, yes, in the Netflix example, that's a Technicolor example that obviously would change consumers' minds because they don't have advertising, and suddenly when advertising shows up, everybody's got an opinion about that. But when we're talking about something like Roku inserting ads, does that really affect the brand in any way in the consumer's mind, considering they're already potentially getting advertising via the streaming services that are available on that network?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the change that we've seen of, consumers have become used to having video without ads, or having that choice, right? So even when you look at the YouTube, skip the ad here, right? And they've started inserting some ads within some YouTube videos if they're longer. But for the most part, you can watch quite a bit without having any type of advertising. And this sort of slow creeping back in of advertising into shows, I think, is going to be a key differentiator for many types of brands. HBO, for example, or any of the movie streaming channels, right? Those were always ad-free. So you paid a subscription and then you didn't have to watch ads. And we're moving into that universe again in a way. And maybe it is sort of like the old cable TV model, as you said earlier. But that's literally what's you're going to see brands have to make a choice about this. If Roku, I use Roku and I use a Roku box, I'm going to probably be a little annoyed if I have now, I pause and I've got an ad on my Roku box. I don't know if I'm going to like that a whole lot. Yep. Or, I haven't signed up for that. I didn't buy their box to get ads from them.
Yeah, but at the same time, what we'd be doing in that model is creating a little ghetto of people who have money, who are the people we're trying to target, are not going to be getting the ads, and the people who don't have money, who are willing to put up with ads for free service, are going to be the only targetable audience. So it's got its pluses and minuses. Jay, you were raising your hand before. You wanted to say something?
Just something struck me a moment ago, that one of the reasons why people want to skip ads on television is that they are typically not very interesting, good, or targeted. If technology like Nielsen, now Roku, and the ability to understand the audience better because of OTT ushers in a new era where broadcast ads are as relevant and in some cases interesting and dynamic as digital ads have become, maybe that upends this whole model. I think part of the problem is not the technology. Part of the problem is that broadcast ads largely suck, other than broadcast ads that are trying to reach a very, very large audience, which is a different kind of advertising in general. I mean, let me put it this way, Bob. I could literally live my life only using goods and services I have bought off of Instagram ads that I didn't know I needed, because those ads are so rifle shot targeted that it gets me every time. Broadcast ads, I never buy anything off a broadcast ad because it's not targeted, or at least not in the same way.
Right. And that's a good point. Well, and it makes a good argument for targeting.
Back to the question of what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to create general awareness, or are you trying to get someone to do something now or within a short period of time? So it really depends, I think, on what your strategic intent is from the ad itself.
Well, right? That's an interesting question, Lisa, and I think a larger issue here, more so than this technology play with Roku, is in a world where broadcast becomes even more fractured than it already has become. And I think it's easy to overlook what has happened because we're all in the industry. But for the layperson, you look at the difference in television today, or let's say video entertainment, at-home video entertainment. You look at the difference today versus 5 years ago. It is colossal. It is unbelievably different in 5 years. And to me, it's inexorable that broadcast advertising has to become more direct response because the audience itself is fracturing other than live sports. That's the only game in town. So to me, we end up with a place in 5 more years where most of your branding campaigns are not broadcast at all. It's something else. I'm not sure what that thing is, but I don't think it's television or streaming.
And that goes back to the theories that we've been having in marketing and advertising for some time in the education space, which is that, brand is experience. So, if you want to create a brand impression, you don't need to do it through a TV commercial. You can do it through anything that creates a memorable experience in the mind of the consumer. And so it will lead to probably a revolution in creativity, which, again, some of the articles were suggesting that we were passing around this week. Well, I want to move on. I want to talk next about Snap. Snap has made it clear that they intend to expand on their already huge strides into augmented reality with the coming creation of a new pair of augmented reality glasses. If you remember, some time ago, Snap had their previous glasses, which were mainly just cameras, but this will be a more sophisticated device, I'm assuming. We don't know anything about it other than they announced that they're going to do something here. So, Adam, we talk about Apple, Google, and Facebook being leaders in this kind of space, the augmented reality space, the virtual reality space. But does Snap hold a key seat at the table with not just the tech titans, but a massive not just the technology that they have at their disposal, but they also have a massive audience already actively using augmented reality technology on a daily basis. So does that put them in the lead? Does that give them some kind of advantage, or are they still kind of fighting an uphill battle against the big three?
Well, in the AR space, it gives them a lead. I mean, overall, are they fighting to make up ground against those other behemoth companies that you mentioned? Yes. I don't know that they'll ever reach the scale of an Apple or the acumen of the product development. But from an AR standpoint, you nailed it. They have a technology that through spectacles, they did multiple iterations and released products and learned. They have the phone and apps and partner apps and partner beta tests and use cases that they put together to learn about AR, to figure out how it works, to maximize it. And they've been really successful with that, making those mini AR applications for brands, and been really successful at that. So you have to consider them leaders because they have more experience than anyone else in the field, actually having users play with it, try it, break it, beta test it. Do you know how many companies make some kind of an AR, like either spectacles or glasses or some kind of competitor in that space? Brands make these products or are trying to, and they can't get anyone to talk about them. Like Epson and Toshiba have these AR products that you've never heard of, and I don't know if they're any good or not because there's nobody to use them. And so if there's nobody to use them, there's nobody to create use cases for them. So Snap has this built-in testing ground and this built-in, it's not quite a flywheel yet, I suspect, but getting there where there's a need for creation and there's revenue coming in to fund it.
One of the things that bothers me about this story is that you would think Snap would get a clue at this point that the Apples and the Googles and the Facebooks of the world are not the innovators of the first movers on these technologies. What they are they're the perfecters of these technologies. So who's with me in agreeing that Snap is just setting themselves up for failure because they'll put forward a new way of doing augmented reality? Whatever they're doing might work, it might not, but if it does work, you'll see a perfection of that technology within a year from Apple and Google and Facebook.
Well, that's usually how it works.
They hire away the CTO, and then next thing you know, they have a product that's just
right. As good. Do you remember the Zune, among other technologies?
Yes.
Right. So. Yeah, but what's the alternative, Bob? Like, well, we're going to lose eventually, so let's make sure we lose by doing nothing today. I mean, that's not a business strategy. Now, to me, the issue is that augmented reality doesn't have to mean pictures. I still believe that despite and I think Adam's point's Exactly right. At least they have user data. At least they have real iteration on this concept. But ultimately, I still believe, and I know Apple's got like 7 million developers working on this too, but I still believe that anything that's on your face is going to be a hard sell at scale. I believe, and I think I've mentioned this on the show years ago, Bob, I still believe the winners in the AR race will not be audio, or will be audio, not visuals. That Apple's AirPods and augmented reality via somebody whispering in your ear, not unlike the movie Her, will ultimately be the winner of this game. Just so much more valuable for most people day to day.
So the audio is more important than the visual in that scenario. So I can see that to a certain extent. Does everybody else agree with that? I mean, the idea, Lisa, I mean, what are your thoughts on the augmented reality kind of gravitating toward an audio solution being the most elegant way to deliver some kind of additional information to the environment that you're in? Or do you need to have video as part of it at some point in order for it to catch on?
I agree with the audio. I think it's key. I'm not really able to use AR technology because I just get, if it's moving too fast, I can't handle it because my brain can't keep up. So I think it's definitely, if they can master it in the audio realm, I think it gives them time to actually really look at it on the video realm. But I don't think Snap's going to be the leader in AR. I think they have a compelling reach. I think they're reaching the 20-year-olds that a lot of people don't know how to reach. So I think from an advertising implication, they might have something there. But I don't think they're going to be the market leaders. I think you're going to see one of the bigger tech giants really take over the space and really drive it home. I mean, they've been trying to conquer this for years, for over 50 years. And like, how do we really, master this space? I don't think we're there yet. And I think when we do get there, it's why are we doing it? And what's the compelling reason to have this other than we've accomplished it? So I'd like to see more data around what they want to do with the technology and how they're going to get it and implement it and bring it out and what the use is going to be for.
Now, something you mentioned a little bit earlier in that statement, which was really, really great, very insightful as far as what's going on here with Snap. But you mentioned the advertising implications, and this is an advertising show. So does anybody have any thoughts? I mean, I don't know, Adam, do you have any thoughts in terms of what the advertising implications of AR are going to be going forward?
Well, a little bit of everything. I mean, we've seen what Snap has done a lot of is trying on, virtual makeup and virtual clothing. And we've seen a few different players try that. So you can, it's almost like looking into a mirror and you're trying on different outfits. Nike did something with them where you could try on a pair of shoes. But they're also, to Jay's point about audio, Google Maps, there's a bunch of different services that have AR tours, if not true AR, but guided tours in other cases where they are guiding you through a city or through a place and saying, oh, and by the way, stop in here if you're hungry or stop over there. So you can see the use cases. You could see the potential for audio, for video and film, or for like an AR animation style. But it is all ways that it is more precisely blending a user need that they could predict and a product, in a way that is better than just serving up a banner ad, to Jay's point about Instagram ads that, is the ultimate cutting tool while you happen to be looking at a recipe.
Well, we've got one more topic I want to reach before we get to the end of the show. Various national ad bans worldwide, and we're not just talking about the U.S., but other countries more particularly doing something like this. But there's a lot of national ad bans worldwide against what doctors or other healthcare workers can or can't promote. And a lot of these bans are running afoul of the dire need to convince folks to be vaccinated against COVID-19. I mean, doctors not able to talk about vaccinations in any kind of advertising are not able to promote the fact that the COVID-19 vaccine is safe, that you need to get it, that you need to be vaccinated as soon as possible for the sake of the rest of the people as well as yourself. Lisa, I realize these bans have good intentions, but do we need to carve out relevant exceptions here, and how do we go about that?
Yeah, I was on a panel with you when we were first talking about what we need to do to really put it out there that the COVID-19 vaccine is safe and people need to take it. And after reading a few of these articles, a part of me was like, why wasn't there already a global plan? We've been battling this pandemic for a year. We knew the vaccines were coming. I would have loved to have seen the WHO organize at least with leaders of countries, and I know that's a tall order to take, but we should have tried to come out with a global plan and then implement them and roll them out into countries based, of course, on their cultures and their needs, and really try to get people all on board on a global reach. So a part of me, when I read this and I saw that the doctors in Australia can't even recommend it, I think that's absurd. There should be some changes to laws if there is something of this magnitude. It's a global pandemic. Perhaps certain rules are changed. Maybe the government's more involved. But I really think that's something we should have looked at in this whole process of coming up with the vaccines and came together on a global basis and really try to roll out that we all need to get this. We're struggling still in the U.S. to get people to take it here. So I think there needs to be something done about this. And now's the time to be talking about it. I think pandemics are going to continue to happen. We already know that, and they could be quicker. We already know that we've accelerated, with COVID-19 hitting. So I would love to see somebody take this on. I think the WHO is a good place, but I believe we should have a global response the next time we're dealing with something like this. And it probably won't be in 100 years. It'll probably be sooner. So I think it's something we need to really start working on now.
I'm not going to lie. You've said the WHO a couple times, and I thought, what the heck is John Entwistle and Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend have to do with
Not
this?
Not that WHO, the World Health Organization WHO.
Yeah, I kind of figured it.
I nominate them to take over. Who's with me?
I'm all for that at this point.
The WHO replaces the WHO. I think you could get real support for that in some corners of the universe. I mean, this is on one level absurd, of course, but also these regulations are there to prevent things like a particular physician promoting a particular vaccine. You got to get you the Moderna, not the J&J, et cetera. There's lots of circumstances by which these regulations are important because people trust physicians, rightfully so in most cases, and that sort of place in society, whether it's physicians or attorneys as well, should have some limitations. To me, the difference should be that you can discuss procedures or medical oriented behaviors, but not specific products, services, devices, etc. Right? And maybe that's splitting hairs where hairs cannot be split. But to me, there's a difference between saying, get a vaccine and, by the way, use this syringe I'm selling them at the office.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, like I said at the beginning of this topic, I mean, there are a lot of situations. I mean, it's with the best intention that these regulations are put in place. And, just willy-nilly saying that we need to forego those regulations in order to get the word out, that could have some bad consequences. Aren't we really saying that the governments of the world should have been preparing their population a little bit better than they have been? I mean, that's what we're really saying, right? We're not saying that doctors need to be freed from their shackles to share that this vaccine is safe. We need health experts who work for the government doing PSAs talking about the fact that the vaccine is safe and you need to get out there and get that. And we need community organizers to get out there and say that. We don't need every doctor putting out commercials. Am I right, or what do you guys think of that?
Yeah.
Well, I think you hit the.
Go ahead, Janell.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said PSA, public service announcements, because that's really what we're talking about is public service announcements as opposed to advertising for commercial products. I mean, yes, these are being made by companies that are commercial enterprises, and they are going to make money off of them at some point in time. But, this is about getting this pandemic under control and getting life back to normal. So it's a very different situation than the advertising for shaky leg syndrome, which I really wish would stop being on my TV.
I've taken that drug. Believe me, it's not worth it. You do not want that drug. It's horrible. Restasis, I think it is, or something. Oh my God. I was a poster child for every single one of the side effects. I'm sorry, someone was going to say something. I think it was Adam.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, you nailed it. What we've seen is that meme that kind of happened around the election where they said all the real news is behind a paywall and the fake news is free. If we do not loosen the reins on this and we do not create PSAs or some kind of a positive communication to tell people that there's actually good things about getting vaccinated, the fake news and all the conspiracy-minded content that is being generated will be the only thing that's out there. So why don't we contribute a little bit on the positive and put together some intelligent messaging about the affirmative case?
Hear, hear. Absolutely. Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Mr. J. Baer. You can find him at convinceandconvert.com. That's the home of his agency, consultancy, content publishing empire. We have so many things going on over there, Jay. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Hey, we're trying a new thing, Bob. This is a shameless plug in advance. So as you know, I've been the co-host of the Social Pros podcast, all about enterprise social media for, 10, 12 years now. And each week we've got a different company on that we talk about their social media. But we've got a new thing that we're trying. First episode will drop in 5 or 6 weeks. I want you guys to think about it and tune in. We're going to do 5 consecutive episodes with our friends at Sam's Club. And each week will be a super deep dive on a different element of social. So 1 week is paid, 1 week's organic, 1 week's branding, 1 week's social listening, 1 week's employer social, and really getting down to the nitty gritty. We're really excited about it. It's the first time we've ever done kind of a basket of episodes around one company that's then bingeable. So we're excited to see how it goes.
Well, that sounds great. That sounds like a really great experiment for you to play around with and see what comes out of it. I'll take a look and see what's happening.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Lisa Laporte. You can find her at tweet.tv. That's where she is the CEO, the head honcho, the boss. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote, Lisa?
Well, definitely check out our network if you're into technology. We have 13 shows as of right now, and stay tuned because next month we're going to launch something very exciting that's confidential. And the other thing I'd like to promote is I just joined a board. It's called Latina Geeks, and you can find more information about them at latinageeks.com. And what we're doing there is I'm helping support them to help grow Latinas in tech. So it's super exciting. I'm helping them out. They have a bunch of webinars, and they also are looking for people if they want to join, if they're Latina and are interested. So that's what I'd like to promote. That sounds
fantastic. And yes, I can say with some authority that the shows on her network are some of the best that are out there on the internet. I listen to several of them on a regular basis, and quite frankly, this show is modeled after a lot of their shows. So I really appreciate you guys over there and what you're doing.
Thanks.
Now, next up, we have Adam Pierno. You can find him at adampierno.com. That's where you can get more information about his books. You can find out about what he's thinking, his writing, his tweeting, everything else he does. So tell us what's going on in your world, Adam. What would you like to promote?
Too much tweeting, Bob. I think I'm hitting that a little too hard. I got to back it down. But right now I'm working on a study and I could use some help. I'm looking at the shape and size of strategy departments inside agencies and marketing teams. And I have a survey that I'm fielding right now where I want strategy pros and people that work with strategy pros, as well as the account people, creative people, media people that fill in the gaps and do strategy work at agencies where there's no formal strategy team. You could participate in that survey at adampierno.com/survey. That'd be a real help for me, and I will be publishing and sharing the results for free for all once they're done.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Last but not least, we have Janell Townsend. You can find her at oakland.edu. That's the home of Oakland University. Tell us what's going on, Janell. What would you like to promote?
Well, I would love to give a shout out to my collegiate DECA team. For those of you who aren't familiar with DECA, it is a national organization. Actually, it's an international organization that helps to prepare emerging leaders and entrepreneurs to be career ready. And they work on professional development skills, professional speaking, networking, etc. But the big thing is they have competitions, first at the state level and then at the national level. And so we just finished our state level competitions, and the Oakland University team did a fantastic job, as did all of the other kids, of course. But I have to give that special plug to Erica Benet, who is the president this year, and the Oakland University Collegiate DECA team.
Oh, congratulations. That's fantastic news. And yeah, definitely check out Janell's work at Oakland University. She's doing some fabulous stuff with the both the undergrad and the graduate programs there. So it's fantastic. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it is time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair. I had two here. I was originally going to go with Chipotle and e.l.f., the cosmetic maker. They did a partnership for a menu-inspired makeup line. I thought this was really weird and really fun the way they did this. So it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. But then I came across this other story about Eleanor Roosevelt Barbie. It's a bit of a stretch. I don't know what you think about this, Lisa, but it's just like, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's kind of a big hit. What do you think about both these campaigns, and which do you think is kind of the winner here this week?
Well, I like them both. I think the Chipotle and e.l.f. partnering together, and they made a guacamole colored eyeshadow. I think this is a great thing because I have an 18-year-old who didn't get to go to prom and do things like that. So I think that's a super smart thing with people being stuck at home and kids not being able to go somewhere. And it just reminds me of what other brands have done in the past. And I think it's a fun thing to offer, especially in COVID. But I'm also into the Eleanor Roosevelt Barbie because I'm tired of Barbie being, this incorrect autonomy for women, for young girls. So I love that they've been rolling out specialized Barbies to show really strong women and what other people, can promote for women instead of, putting them in little Barbie bikinis. So I like them both. But if I were to pick, I'd take the Chipotle and e.l.f.
Yeah, it's just like that Chipotle e.l.f. thing is really well done. I'm pretty excited about it. And I think I agree with you on the Eleanor Roosevelt Barbie in all senses. I mean, it's really important for young girls to be able to envision themselves as leaders, as big political leaders, as social leaders out there in society. And I think this does a really good job, although it is a stretch because it's just like Eleanor Roosevelt was not a Barbie. And I think that could potentially be a negative on this effort because it just kind of reinforces the idea that you need to be pretty in order to be successful. And I think that's a wrong stereotype. So it's a little bit of both going on there. Well, the fail of the week is Suit Supply's new campaign of models writhing together and licking each other's faces at them. I don't know. Did you see this ad? Did you take a chance to see this? And
I sure did.
I mean, they're writhing around. It's supposed to be a post-pandemic orgy, I think, but I have no idea what they're trying to get across. And Suit Supply is not known for their well-reasoned, well-thought-out, well-considered advertising. So I'm not surprised that they did something like this, but it does seem a little bit weird in this particular time.
Yeah, when I saw that particular piece, I thought, oh man, I should buy stock in Trojan. It is going to be crazy out there. I'm actually glad I am happily married and I will be avoiding that, but I'm expecting a baby boom. So it's going to be a pretty wild 18 months as the pandemic restricts and brands come out swinging with this kind of creative, inspiring that activity.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a weird time. We may have the Roaring 20s all over again, as they're saying on the news.
I just feel like if you're going to go that route, Bob, just go all the way. You need like the edible suit. Like, all you got to do is get a Taylor and some fruit roll-ups, and you have yourself some truly groundbreaking advertising.
And product at the same time. So there you go. Well, the foul of the week I'm going to give to Facebook, Janell, because they banned yet another breastfeeding ad over visible nipples, which begs the question, how else are you supposed to breastfeed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think, it's something that they probably, didn't even necessarily need to point out. Probably created more buzz by, canceling it than just leaving it alone and let it go, because there was really no point to that. You can't even say that, at least the Suits ad, you could say has some, could potentially be really offensive to someone's sensibilities, but it's kind of hard to understand how breastfeeding might be. So
people get offended by it, though. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy how people come out of the woodwork and say, you shouldn't do that in public. And it's awful the way we treat breastfeeding women in this country.
That's a very American phenomenon, right? And different parts of the world view these things very differently. True. I think even in different parts of this country, they view them differently.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think you're going to find the same level of offense on either coast, but probably in, certain flyover states, that's going to be a bigger problem than others.
Yeah.
I don't think Zuckerberg was breastfed. I don't have exact data on this. I'm not certain. I don't have exact data. I think he was bottle fed a formula that was 50% inconsistent decision making and 50% lack of common sense.
Don't let me forget that Zuckerberg was bottle fed. I think that's fantastic.
Bob, why don't you just make Facebook the fail every week, or make a spinoff show? It's easy enough to come up with something every week that angers everybody.
You could go daily. You could honestly go daily.
Oh, man. Believe me, I've been down that route. I used to do 5 of these fails. I know how hard it was to come up with all these fails. Well, have a suggestion for the list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
Like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.